Imagine standing in a crowded courtroom 2,400 years ago. The air is heavy, charged with tension. Nearly 500 jurors of Athens sit in judgment, their eyes fixed on an old man who stands barefoot before them. His face is weathered, his body thin, his gaze calm but piercing. This man is accused of corrupting the youth of Athens, of questioning the gods, of being a danger to the city. The punishment, if found guilty, is death. Most men would beg, most would plead for mercy, but this man does not. He does not tremble. He does not flatter. He does not try to escape. Instead, he looks upon his judges with a faint smile and declares words that will echo across history. The unexamined life is not worth living. With that, he seals his fate. He will die by poison. His name is Socrates. And yet, in that courtroom, while Socrates' life ends, the mind of a young man named Plato begins to awaken. Plato is not yet the philosopher who will transform human thought, but he is present, absorbing every word, every gesture, every lesson in courage, wisdom, and inquiry. The shock of Socrates' death leaves a deep impression on him. How could a city capable of extraordinary beauty, drama, and intellect condemn a man so devoted to truth? How could Athens, which prides itself on democracy, reject wisdom itself? This question, why the wisest man in Athens was executed by a democratic jury, will haunt Plato for the rest of his life. Out of that haunting will come one of the greatest bodies of philosophy ever written. To understand Plato's awakening, we must step back into the Athens of his youth. It was a city dazzling in brilliance, but also scarred by conflict. Plato was born around 427 BCE, during the height of the Peloponnesian War, a long and bitter conflict between Athens and Sparta. Athens was famous for its art, its theater, its architecture. The Parthenon rose above the Acropolis as a symbol of human achievement. Tragedies by Sophocles and Euripides filled the city's theaters with stories of fate, justice, and human struggle. Sculptors like Phidias created marble figures so lifelike they seemed ready to breathe. And in the Agora, the public square, citizens debated politics, philosophy, and the future of the city. But Athens was also a city at war with itself. Democracy was still an experiment, fragile and often chaotic. Leaders like Pericles had expanded the rights of citizens, giving ordinary men a say in the decisions of the polis. But the same system that gave freedom also gave rise to demagogues, persuasive speakers, who swayed crowds with emotion rather than reason. The Peloponnesian War brought devastation. Athens suffered not only military defeats, but also plague, starvation, and political upheaval. At one point, democracy was overthrown by an oligarchy known as the 30 Tyrants, who ruled brutally, executing hundreds of citizens. Though democracy was eventually restored, the city remained unstable, scarred by factionalism and distrust. For a young man like Plato, born into an aristocratic family, the contradictions of Athens were everywhere. On one hand, he inherited prestige and connections. His father's side claimed descent from the early kings of Athens, and his mother's side traced lineage to the great lawgiver Solon. Politics, power, and civic duty surrounded him. On the other hand, the city's constant turmoil revealed the limits of politics as it was practiced. Leaders rose and fell, policies shifted, and justice often seemed a matter of who could speak most persuasively to the crowd. It was in this atmosphere that Plato encountered Socrates. Socrates was unlike any man Plato had ever known. He owned no school, charged no fees, and wrote no books. Instead, he walked the streets of Athens, engaging people in conversation. Politicians, poets, craftsmen, and generals. No one was safe from his probing questions. Socrates would stop someone in the marketplace and ask, "What is justice?" Or, "What is courage?" His interlocutors, confident at first, would soon find themselves entangled. unable to define what they thought they knew. Socrates himself claimed ignorance. He insisted he did not have wisdom, but through his method of questioning, he revealed the ignorance of others and pointed toward deeper truths. This relentless questioning earned him admiration from some, but hostility from many. He exposed the emptiness of pompous officials and the contradictions of self-proclaimed wise men. He challenged the myths of the gods and pushed young people to think for themselves. To his critics, this made him a dangerous subversive, a man who undermined tradition and corrupted youth. To Plato, however, Socrates embodied philosophy itself, a life devoted to truth, unafraid of ridicule, wealthless yet rich in wisdom. In Socrates, Plato saw what it meant to live with integrity, to care for the soul above all else. The trial of Socrates, then, was not just the trial of a man. It was the trial of philosophy itself. And the verdict was clear. Athens, the proud democracy, found Socrates guilty and sentenced him to death. For Plato, the execution was a turning point. Here was a city that celebrated theater, art, and debate, yet it silenced its greatest truth seeker. Here was a democracy that claimed to honor freedom, yet it condemned the man for speaking freely. The contradictions cut deeply. If democracy could kill Socrates, was democracy truly just? If the many could be swayed by passion and fear, could they ever govern wisely? If truth itself could be outlawed, what hope was there for wisdom in public life? These were not abstract questions for Plato. They were urgent, pressing, and personal. He had seen his teacher drink hemlock with calm dignity, choosing death over abandoning his principles. The image would never leave him. Philosophy, Plato realized, was not a game of words or theories. It was a matter of life and death, of the soul's survival in a chaotic world. Plato would spend the rest of his life seeking answers, and his search would begin by examining not only the soul, but also the city that condemned Socrates. To understand Plato's response, we must understand Athenian democracy itself, its origins, strengths, and weaknesses. Democracy in Athens did not emerge overnight. In the 6th century BCE, the lawgiver Cleisthenes introduced reforms that broke the power of aristocratic clans. He reorganized citizens into new political groups, weakening old loyalties and empowering broader participation. The assembly ecclesia, open to all male citizens, became the central decision-making body. In theory, every citizen had an equal voice. This was revolutionary. In a world dominated by kings and tyrants, Athens offered a model of shared governance. Citizens voted on laws, debated policies, and even held trials with massive juries, like the one that judged Socrates. Leadership was chosen not by wealth or birth, but often by lot, a radical experiment in equality. But democracy had limits. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. Only about 10 to 15% of Athens' population had political rights. And even among citizens, the system was vulnerable to manipulation. Skilled orators could sway the crowd with emotional speeches, appealing to anger, fear, or greed rather than reason. Military generals, like Pericles, could dominate politics through charisma. When things went badly, as in the disastrous Sicilian expedition, the people often shifted blame quickly, punishing leaders in fits of rage. The trial of Socrates is one of the clearest examples of these flaws. Here was a man who threatened no one physically, who led no armies, who sought only truth, yet the jury, swayed by fear and resentment, condemned him. Plato saw in this not just a personal tragedy, but a systemic problem. Democracy, for all its ideals, could become mob rule. The many could act unjustly, just as easily as a tyrant could. Truth could be silenced, not because it was false, but because it was unpopular. From this experience, Plato began to ask the question that would define his philosophy. What is justice, and how can a city embody it? Socrates had shown that individuals often live without examining themselves, mistaking opinion for truth. Plato extended this to politics. Cities, too, can live without examining themselves, mistaking passion or tradition for wisdom. If justice was not simply what the majority decided, then what was it? If a city could kill its wisest man, what form of government could truly nurture wisdom? These questions would drive Plato to seek not only metaphysical truths about the soul, knowledge, and reality, but also political truths about governance, education, and the nature of society. Thus, in the shadow of Socrates' death, Plato's journey begins. Athens, the city of contradictions, had shown both the heights of human creativity and the depths of human folly. In the execution of Socrates, Plato saw the danger of democracy, unmoored from wisdom, and so he set out on a lifelong quest to discover a philosophy that could guide not only the individual soul, but also the city itself. In the next part, we will follow Plato beyond Athens, to his travels in Italy, Egypt, and beyond, where he sought wisdom in mathematics, cosmology, and the mysteries of foreign lands. These journeys would provide the building blocks of the philosophy that still shapes our world today. After the death of Socrates, Plato could not remain in Athens. The city felt tainted, unsafe, hostile to philosophy itself. So he left, traveling in search of wisdom, knowledge, and models of a better life than the chaos he had witnessed in his homeland. His journeys would take him far beyond Greece, to lands of ancient learning and foreign mysteries, and each step would shape the philosophy he would later bring back to Athens. Plato's first destination was Megara, a city near Athens, where many of Socrates' followers had fled for safety. There he studied with Euclides of Megara, a philosopher who blended Socratic ideas with Eleatic logic. In Megara, Plato deepened his understanding of argument, dialectic, and the subtle relationship between being and knowledge. But soon, his travels carried him further still. In southern Italy, he encountered the Pythagoreans, a community that lived not only by mathematics, but by a philosophy of harmony and proportion. To the Pythagoreans, numbers were not abstractions. They were the very structure of reality. Music, the movement of the stars, the order of the cosmos, all could be expressed in ratios, in patterns, in mathematical relationships that revealed an underlying unity of existence. This was a revelation for Plato. The Pythagoreans showed him that philosophy was not only about ethics or politics, but about the structure of the universe itself. The idea that beyond appearances there is order, form, and intelligibility resonated deeply with him. From them, he absorbed the conviction that truth is not fleeting or relative, but eternal and discoverable if one learns to see correctly. From Italy, Plato traveled to Sicily, where he was drawn into the politics of Syracuse. There he encountered the difficulties of applying philosophy to governance directly. The rulers of Syracuse, powerful but corrupt, intrigued Plato, who wondered if a philosopher could ever truly guide a city. It was an early test of his conviction that philosophy should not remain in ivory towers, but must engage with the realities of power. He also ventured further to Egypt, a land that seemed timeless, steeped in knowledge that stretched back millennia. In Egypt, he studied geometry, astronomy, and religious practices. He saw temples aligned to the stars, sacred rituals preserved for generations, and a culture that sought permanence amidst change. The Egyptian priests taught him the importance of order and cosmic balance, principles that would later echo in his philosophy of the soul and the state. Other accounts suggest Plato reached as far as Cyrene in North Africa, where he studied mathematics under Theodorus, a master of geometry. Whether or not these travels took him that far, it is clear that Plato absorbed wisdom from diverse traditions, stitching them into his own vision. Wherever he went, he sought not merely knowledge, but the deeper principle behind it, the eternal truths beneath the shifting sands of human affairs. After years abroad, Plato returned to Athens with a new purpose. He would not only write, not only question, but build an institution dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom. Around 387 BCE, in a grove of olive trees sacred to the hero Academus, he founded the Academy. The Academy was something new in the Greek world. Unlike the wandering sophists, who sold lessons in rhetoric and persuasion, Plato established a permanent place of study. It was not simply a school, but a community, a place where philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and ethics were woven together in the search for truth. Daily life in the Academy was a rhythm of study and dialogue. Students began with mathematics, learning the harmony of numbers and proportions. In the afternoons, they debated questions of justice, virtue, and the good life. At night, they studied the heavens, mapping the stars and seeking order in the cosmos. Education here was not about memorization, but transformation. The goal was to turn the soul away from appearances and toward reality, from opinion to truth. Plato himself guided discussions, often in the form of dialogues that echoed the style of his teacher Socrates. Through conversation, he pressed students to examine their assumptions, to question deeply, to seek clarity rather than persuasion. The Academy was not about winning arguments, but about aligning the soul with what is true and eternal. And yet, even within the Academy, Plato's mind turned constantly to the city outside its walls. For he had not forgotten Socrates, nor the injustice of his trial. Philosophy, Plato believed, must not remain abstract. It must shape life, both for the individual and for society. His Academy, therefore, was not just a refuge from Athens, but a training ground for those who might someday guide it. This is where Plato began to develop one of his most enduring ideas, the theory of forms. Observing the world, he noticed that everything in it is imperfect and transient. A circle drawn in sand is never perfectly round, yet we recognize the idea of a perfect circle in our minds. Acts of justice in the city may be flawed, partial, or corrupted, yet we understand what true justice ought to be. Beauty fades, bodies age, cities crumble, but the very concepts of beauty, justice, and goodness endure unchanged. Plato reasoned that beyond the physical world lies a higher realm of eternal forms, perfect realities of which the things we see are only shadows or imitations. To live wisely is to orient the soul toward this higher realm, to recognize that the visible world is fleeting, but truth is eternal. This vision transformed philosophy from a practice of argument into a path of ascent. To study geometry was not just to calculate shapes, but to train the mind to see eternal order. To study ethics was not just to argue about custom, but to orient the soul toward justice itself. Philosophy became, for Plato, a preparation for the eternal. Through the Academy, Plato began to articulate not only the metaphysical structure of reality, but also the political structure of a just city. For if the soul must turn toward truth, so too must the polis. If individuals must learn to rule themselves through reason, so too must a city be ruled by wisdom. The Academy endured for centuries, influencing generations of thinkers. But its true power lay not in buildings or curriculum, but in the way it embodied Plato's conviction that philosophy is not a luxury, not a pastime, but a way of life, the only way to live a life worthy of the soul. Thus, through travel, study, and teaching, Plato forged the tools of his philosophy: the Pythagorean vision of order, the Egyptian reverence for balance, the Socratic commitment to truth, and his own conviction that beyond appearances lies eternal reality. These tools would soon be put to their greatest use, as Plato turned to the questions that haunted him most. What is justice? What is the soul? And how can we live in a way that aligns with the eternal? In the next part, we will explore how Plato's ideas took shape in his dialogues, works like the Republic, the Symposium, and the Phaedo, where he wove together myth, reason, and imagination to illuminate the path of the soul and the destiny of the city. As Plato matured as a philosopher, his ideas found expression not in treatises, but in dialogues. He chose to write in the voice of Socrates, his teacher and moral exemplar, whose method of questioning became the model for philosophical inquiry. These dialogues were more than literary works. They were living conversations designed to draw readers into the very process of thinking. In the Apology, Plato preserved Socrates' defense at his trial, ensuring that future generations would know not only the injustice of Athens, but also the dignity of the man it condemned. In the Crito, he depicted Socrates calmly refusing to escape prison, insisting that one must never repay injustice with injustice. In the Phaedo, he described Socrates' final hours, discussing the immortality of the soul before drinking the fatal cup of hemlock. These works gave voice to Plato's grief, but also to his conviction that philosophy was a preparation for death, a turning of the soul toward what is eternal. Yet Plato did not stop with memory. He sought to build on Socrates' foundation, extending his teacher's questions into new territory. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Republic, his most famous and influential dialogue. The Republic begins with a question as old as Athens itself. What is justice? Socrates' interlocutors offer definitions. Justice is giving people what they deserve. Justice is the advantage of the stronger. Justice is helping friends and harming enemies. Socrates dismantles each answer, showing their contradictions. But Plato, through Socrates, pushes further, asking not only what justice is in individuals, but what it would mean for an entire city to be just. Thus unfolds the vision of the Callipolis, the beautiful city. In this city, justice is harmony. Each part does its proper work, guided by wisdom. The producers, farmers, craftsmen, merchants provide for material needs. The auxiliaries, soldiers, and guardians protect the city with courage. And above them, ruling with knowledge, are the philosopher kings. These rare individuals, trained from youth in mathematics, dialectic, and the discipline of the soul, are capable of seeing beyond appearances to the eternal forms. Only they can govern justly, for only they know what justice truly is. This vision was radical. In a democracy where every citizen claimed a voice, Plato suggested that only the wise were truly fit to rule. To modern ears, the idea of philosopher kings may sound elitist, even impossible. But to Plato, it was the logical answer to the problem revealed in Socrates' trial. If the many could condemn the wisest man in Athens, then the many could not be trusted to guide the city. Wisdom, not popularity, must be the foundation of justice. At the heart of the Republic lies one of Plato's most enduring images, the allegory of the cave. He asks us to imagine prisoners chained in darkness, seeing only shadows cast on the wall before them. To these prisoners, the shadows are reality. But if one prisoner is freed, he turns and sees the fire that casts the shadows. If he leaves the cave, he sees the sun, and finally beholds the true world beyond illusions. For Plato, this is the condition of the human soul. Most people live among shadows, mistaking opinion, appearances, and custom for truth. The philosopher is the one who breaks free, who turns the soul toward the eternal realities, the forms, illuminated by the ultimate source of truth, the form of the good. And yet, the philosopher must not remain in the light. He must return to the cave, to guide others, even at the risk of rejection or death. This, for Plato, is the calling of philosophy, not only to see truth, but to share it. Beyond the Republic, Plato explored the mysteries of love in the Symposium. Here, a group of Athenians gather at a banquet to deliver speeches in praise of Eros, the god of love. Some speak of love as desire, others as friendship, others as the drive for immortality through children or fame. But Socrates, recounting the teachings of the priestess Diotima, presents a higher vision. Love, he says, begins with physical attraction, but ascends step by step toward the love of souls, of knowledge, and ultimately of beauty itself. not beauty in any single body, but the eternal form of beauty. This ladder of love is another path of ascent, parallel to the cave. For Plato, love is not merely passion or desire. It is the soul's longing for what is eternal, the drive that lifts us from the transient to the timeless. Through love, the soul remembers its kinship with the divine. In the Phaedrus, Plato extended this vision, describing the soul as a charioteer driving two horses, one noble, one unruly. The noble horse pulls us toward wisdom and truth. The unruly horse drags us toward pleasure and excess. The task of the charioteer is to guide both, to master desire without destroying it, to harmonize the soul's energies in the pursuit of the divine. In this vision, philosophy is not the denial of passion, but its transformation, a discipline that directs desire toward truth. Underlying all of these dialogues is a conviction that knowledge is not created, but remembered. In the Meno, Plato presents the idea of anamnesis. The soul, before birth, beheld the eternal forms, but forgot them upon entering the body. Learning, therefore, is recollection, a gradual remembering of what the soul once knew. This explains why mathematical truths seem self-evident, why we recognize justice even in its absence, why beauty strikes us as familiar. To learn is to awaken the soul to its own eternal nature. Through these dialogues, Plato built a vision that encompassed ethics, politics, love, knowledge, and the soul. Each theme is united by a single thread. The eternal is real, the temporal is fleeting, and philosophy is the path from one to the other. The soul must turn away from shadows and passions, and ascend toward wisdom, harmony, and the good. And yet, for all his metaphysical vision, Plato never forgot the city. The cave was not only an allegory of the soul, but of society itself. The Callipolis was not only a thought experiment, but a challenge to Athens and every city. Can we create a community governed by wisdom, not by desire or fear? These questions made Plato more than a thinker. They made him a reformer of the soul and the city, a man seeking to bind the eternal with the human. His philosophy was not only speculation, but a call to transformation for individuals, for communities, for civilization itself. In the next part, we will turn to the later years of Plato's life, when he attempted to bring philosophy into the world of politics directly. We will see how he wrestled with failure in Syracuse, how he refined his vision in works like the Laws, and how his academy became the seedbed for his greatest student, Aristotle, the philosopher who would carry Plato's legacy forward while charting his own path. In the later years of his life, Plato turned his eyes once again from theory to practice. Philosophy for him was never meant to remain only in words. It was meant to shape how human beings live together, how they govern themselves, how justice can be made real in the world. And so, despite his disillusionment with Athenian democracy, he sought opportunities to see whether the philosopher's vision could take root in politics. This ambition led him to Sicily, to the powerful city of Syracuse. There, the tyrant Dionysius I held sway, a man of immense power but little inclination toward philosophy. Plato hoped that he could influence Dionysius, or at least his court, guiding them toward the model of a just ruler. The experiment was fraught with danger. A philosopher in a tyrant's palace walked a narrow line between persuasion and imprisonment. Indeed, at one point, Plato's relationship with Dionysius soured so badly that he was sold into slavery, only narrowly rescued by friends who ransomed him back to freedom. Yet Plato did not abandon the hope. Years later, when Dionysius II inherited power, Plato returned to Syracuse, encouraged by his friend Dion, a relative of the ruler who admired philosophy. Once again, Plato attempted to educate a ruler into becoming a philosopher king. Once again, the effort faltered. Court intrigues, jealousy, and the temptations of power proved too strong. Dionysius II lacked the discipline to embrace philosophy, and Plato's dream of realizing the Callipolis in flesh and blood collapsed. These failures weighed heavily on him. They underscored the difficulty of translating philosophy into politics, of bridging the world of eternal forms with the world of human ambition. But instead of despairing, Plato refined his thought. If the Republic was a vision of the ideal, his later dialogue, The Laws, was an attempt to grapple with reality. In The Laws, Plato set aside the dream of philosopher kings and asked instead, what is the best possible city we can build, given human limitations? The answer was less utopian, more practical. The city he described was governed not by a single philosopher-ruler, but by laws shaped with wisdom. Education, music, and ritual would instill virtue from youth. Moderation and balance would guide citizens away from excess. Religion and custom would be harnessed to support morality, not to stifle thought. Here, Plato showed that while perfection might be unattainable, improvement was not. Even flawed human beings, guided by law and philosophy, could build a city more just as Athens or Syracuse had ever been. While these political experiments rose and fell, Plato's greatest achievement of this period was the founding of his school, the Academy. Established around 387 BCE in a grove sacred to the hero Academus, the Academy became the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. Here, students gathered not merely to hear lectures, but to participate in inquiry, to train the mind in dialectic, mathematics, and the pursuit of truth. The Academy was more than a school. It was a community devoted to philosophy as a way of life. Students were not taught what to think, but how to think, to question, to reason, to test their ideas against one another in dialogue. This spirit would shape generations of thinkers, carrying Plato's influence far beyond his lifetime. Among those who walked beneath the trees of the Academy was a young man from the northern kingdom of Macedon, brilliant and curious, Aristotle. For 20 years, Aristotle studied under Plato, absorbing his teacher's methods while also developing his own distinct vision. Where Plato emphasized eternal forms, Aristotle sought knowledge in the particulars of the natural world. Where Plato dreamed of ideal cities, Aristotle analyzed the constitutions of real ones. The two stood in tension, yet their relationship was one of profound continuity, a passing of the torch from master to student that would define Western philosophy for centuries. As Plato grew older, his writings took on a more sober tone. He never abandoned the hope that philosophy could guide humanity, but he recognized its challenges more clearly. The death of Socrates had shown him the dangers of democracy. The failures in Syracuse had revealed the corrupting force of power. The founding of the Academy, however, gave him confidence that philosophy could endure, not in the hands of a single ruler, but in the shared pursuit of wisdom across generations. Plato died around 347 BCE, at the age of about 80. Tradition holds that he passed away peacefully, perhaps even during a wedding feast, his mind still devoted to the harmony of life. By then, he had left behind a body of work unmatched in scope and depth, dialogues that probed the soul, the city, the cosmos, and the eternal. He had transformed the memory of his teacher into the foundation of philosophy. He had dreamed of justice and sought to shape it in practice. And he had built an institution that would carry his spirit forward. The legacy of Plato cannot be measured only in books or doctrines. It lives in the very idea of philosophy, as a pursuit of truth beyond opinion, as a discipline that seeks not only to understand, but to transform. From the Academy flowed a river of thought that nourished Aristotle, influenced Alexander the Great, shaped Roman thinkers like Cicero, guided Christian theologians like Augustine, inspired Islamic philosophers like Al-Farabi and Avicenna, and echoed through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and into our modern world. Even today, when we ask what justice is, when we question the nature of truth, when we debate the purpose of education or the responsibilities of government, we are speaking in Plato's shadow. His dialogues remain alive, inviting us into conversation, urging us to turn from shadows to the light, from opinion to wisdom, from the fleeting to the eternal. The story that began with the death of Socrates thus ends with the birth of philosophy as we know it. Plato took the tragedy of his teacher's trial and transformed it into a vision of the examined life, a vision that continues to challenge, inspire, and guide us across the centuries. Imagine now that we leave the streets of Athens behind and follow Plato on his journeys through the wider Greek world and beyond, seeking wisdom wherever it might be found. These travels, spanning years, would shape the foundation of his philosophy, exposing him to ideas far older and stranger than anything in his native city. Plato's first stop was the Greek colonies of southern Italy, the region known as Magna Graecia. There, he encountered the Pythagoreans, disciples of the legendary mathematician and mystic Pythagoras. These thinkers had a radical view of reality. Numbers were not mere tools for counting or calculation. They were the essence of the cosmos itself. The harmony of musical intervals, the symmetry of geometric forms, the proportions of the heavens, all reflected a deep mathematical order. To Plato, this was a revelation. The universe was intelligible, structured, and governed by eternal principles. Reality was not chaotic or arbitrary. It was rational and beautiful, and the human mind could comprehend its patterns. The Pythagorean influence on Plato was profound. He adopted their reverence for mathematics, seeing in it a path to truth. But Plato did not stop at numbers. He extended this logic to ethics and politics. If the universe had an intelligible structure, could the soul not also be ordered? If numbers revealed eternal truths, could moral principles be just as fixed and knowable? These questions would eventually blossom into his theory of forms, the vision of a reality where the eternal, perfect, and immutable exists beyond the fluctuating appearances of the physical world. From Italy, Plato journeyed to Egypt, a land of monumental architecture, precise astronomy, and complex religious rituals. He studied with priests and scholars who had preserved knowledge over centuries. In the shadow of the pyramids, with the Nile flowing steadily past, Plato observed a civilization that combined spiritual insight with scientific understanding. The Egyptians taught him that knowledge could be both practical and sacred, a tool for understanding the world and for cultivating the soul. Their fascination with geometry, astronomy, and the cosmos would resonate in Plato's later writings, linking the heavens to the moral order of human life. Plato may also have traveled to Cyrene, in modern-day Libya, to study mathematics with teachers like Theodorus. Each journey expanded his mind, weaving together threads of logic, number, cosmology, and spiritual reflection. By the time he returned to Athens, Plato had seen that human understanding could transcend the narrow confines of a single city. Knowledge was universal, and wisdom was a pursuit that demanded courage, curiosity, and humility. Returning home around 387 BCE, Plato founded the Academy in a grove dedicated to the hero Academus. This was not merely a school, it was a community devoted to inquiry, debate, and the cultivation of the soul. Students rose early to study mathematics, delving into the relationships of numbers and the harmony of ratios. Afternoons were devoted to dialogue and ethical reflection. What is justice? What is courage? What is the good life? Each discussion was rigorous, forcing students to confront their assumptions and recognize the limits of their knowledge. The academy reflected Plato's philosophy in practice. Knowledge was not abstract or distant. It was a tool for the soul. Philosophy was not a pastime. It was a discipline, a way of living. Mathematics, music, ethics, politics, and metaphysics were not separate fields. They were paths converging on the same truth. Plato believed that by training the mind and soul together, individuals could ascend from ignorance to understanding, from desire to reason, and from illusion to reality. One of Plato's earliest and most enduring insights is the theory of forms. Physical objects, he observed, are imperfect and transient. A drawn circle is never perfectly round. A beautiful face will age. Even acts of justice are flawed. Yet we recognize the essence of these things, the perfect circle, the ideal beauty, the true justice. Plato reasoned that beyond the material world must exist a realm of perfect, eternal forms. These forms are immutable, absolute, and the source of all that we perceive. Physical objects are mere shadows, participating imperfectly in these eternal realities. The form of the good illuminates all truth and morality. The form of beauty defines what is truly beautiful. The form of justice anchors our understanding of fairness and virtue. To help his students grasp this concept, Plato created the allegory of the cave. Imagine prisoners chained from birth, facing a blank wall. Behind them burns a fire, casting shadows as objects pass before it. The prisoners, seeing only the shadows, believe them to be reality. One prisoner is freed and forced into the sunlight. Blinded and disoriented, he gradually perceives real objects, the world itself, and finally, the sun, the ultimate source of light and truth. Plato's allegory illustrates the painful but necessary ascent from illusion to understanding. True philosophers, like the freed prisoner, must confront the light, even when it blinds and challenges them, and then return to the cave to guide others toward knowledge. Plato's vision of the soul mirrors this ascent. He divides the soul into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason seeks wisdom, understanding, and the forms. Spirit fuels courage, ambition, and moral indignation. Appetite pursues bodily desires, pleasure, and comfort. Justice arises when each part performs its proper role. Reason governs, spirit supports reason, and appetite follows. Disorder occurs when appetite dominates, leading to vice and chaos. Plato's psychology is not theoretical. It is practical guidance for living a good life. Cultivate reason, train spirit, and temper desire. Education for Plato is the ladder of ascent. From early instruction in mathematics, music, and ethics to the philosophical training of the soul, individuals are gradually prepared to perceive eternal truths. Love, too, plays a crucial role. In the Symposium, Plato describes a ladder of love. From the admiration of a single beautiful body to the appreciation of all beauty, ultimately culminating in the contemplation of beauty itself, the eternal and unchanging form. Desire, properly directed, becomes a force driving the soul toward wisdom and virtue. Plato's dialogues preserve these lessons in living conversation. Socrates remains the central figure, questioning interlocutors, revealing their assumptions, and probing their understanding. But Plato's own voice emerges, constructing systematic visions of reality, morality, and politics. The dialogues blend ethical inquiry, political reflection, metaphysics, and psychological insight, offering not just ideas, but models for how to think, question, and live. As Plato's thought matures, he turns to the structure of society. In the Republic, he asks, what makes a city just? Just as the soul has three parts, the city has three classes: rulers, philosopher kings; guardians, the courageous auxiliaries; and producers, workers, artisans, and farmers. Justice arises when each class performs its proper role without interference. The rulers govern wisely, the guardians protect courageously, and the producers provide diligently. Disorder emerges when roles are confused or ambition overrides reason. Plato's political philosophy is thus inseparable from his ethics. The good city mirrors the well-ordered soul. To ensure capable rulers, Plato proposes rigorous education. From childhood, individuals are trained according to their natural abilities. Mathematics, gymnastics, music, and philosophy form the core curriculum. Only after years of moral and intellectual training can one ascend to become a philosopher king, ruling not for personal gain, but for the welfare of the city. Plato attempted to implement this ideal in Syracuse, seeking to guide Dionysius II toward wisdom, but politics proved resistant to philosophy. Yet the principle remained. Rulers should be guided by knowledge, virtue, and reason, even if reality falls short. Plato's vision integrates ethics, politics, and love. A just city reflects a just soul. A soul guided by reason and virtue seeks truth. Love motivates the ascent toward wisdom and the divine. Education, dialogue, and moral cultivation are the instruments by which humans approach the eternal. Knowledge is never neutral, it shapes the soul and society alike. Plato's later works, such as Timaeus, expand this vision to the cosmos. The universe, he argues, is the creation of the demiurge, a divine craftsman who orders reality according to eternal mathematical principles. Stars, planets, and living beings reflect proportion, harmony, and purpose. Knowledge of the cosmos is inseparable from knowledge of virtue and justice. Philosophy becomes the bridge connecting the heavens, the city, and the soul, demonstrating that moral, political, and cosmic orders are intertwined. Even after his death around 347 BCE, Plato's influence endured. His academy trained Aristotle, who carried Plato's methods into empirical study. Later thinkers, Philo, Augustine, Al-Farabi, Avicenna integrated Platonic ideas into theology and cosmology. During the Renaissance, artists and humanists rediscovered Plato, applying his principles of harmony, order, and beauty across art, science, and philosophy. Modern thinkers, from Descartes to Kant, continued to grapple with Platonic questions, showing that Plato's insights remain relevant across millennia. Standing today in the groves where the academy once thrived, we hear no voices, yet the questions remain. What is truth? What is justice? What is the good life? What is love? Plato offers no simple answers, only the guidance to seek, question, and ascend. His legacy is a living philosophy, a call to live thoughtfully, ethically, and courageously, and to shape both the soul and the city in accordance with eternal truths. Plato's metaphysics moves beyond the tangible world, building on the foundations of the theory of forms. For him, reality is layered. The material world we perceive with our senses is only a shadow of a higher, unchanging reality. Every tree, river, or human action participates in its perfect form, tree, river, justice, beauty, but never fully embodies it. Plato's metaphysics is not abstract speculation. It is a map for the mind, a framework for understanding why knowledge is possible and how human beings can align themselves with truth. Central to this is the form of the good, the ultimate principle in Plato's universe. Just as the sun illuminates physical objects, making them visible to the eye, the good illuminates all knowledge, morality, and reality itself. Without it, one cannot truly know or act rightly. To understand justice, courage, or beauty, one must grasp the good. Philosophers, Plato insists, are those capable of perceiving the form of the good, They are uniquely equipped to govern, teach, and guide society because their understanding transcends opinion, passion, and deception. Plato extends this metaphysical insight to ethics. The soul, immortal and divine, is the instrument through which humans perceive reality. The alignment of the soul determines virtue. When reason governs spirit and appetite, individuals act justly, courageously, and wisely. Education, dialogue, and philosophical contemplation are the tools by which the soul ascends toward understanding the forms. Moral failure, by contrast, arises when the soul is dominated by appetite or misdirected spirit, leading to injustice, greed, and vice. In the Republic, Plato presents a detailed vision of the just city as a macrocosm of the soul. Each citizen has a role suited to their abilities. Rulers govern with wisdom, auxiliaries defend with courage, and producers sustain society with their labor. Justice arises when each performs their function without overstepping. Plato's city is hierarchical, yes, but it is ordered by reason and the pursuit of the good, not arbitrary power. Democracy, which had condemned Socrates, could easily lapse into mob rule. Tyranny could arise when desire and ambition dominate. Plato's ideal city is an experiment in aligning social structures with ethical and metaphysical truths. Education is central to this vision. From childhood, individuals are trained to cultivate their natural abilities. Mathematics teaches abstract reasoning and the recognition of eternal truths. Music harmonizes the soul. Physical training tempers the body and spirit. Philosophy sharpens judgment and moral insight. Only those whose minds and souls have ascended can become rulers, embodying the principles of justice and wisdom. Plato's educational system is rigorous, lifelong, and holistic, aimed at shaping not just minds, but character, virtue, and civic responsibility. Plato's exploration of love in the Symposium complements his metaphysics and ethics. Love, or eros, is not merely a desire for beauty. It is a force that propels the soul toward higher understanding. Beginning with physical attraction, one ascends to admiration of all beauty, then to the beauty of minds, laws, and institutions, culminating in the contemplation of pure, eternal beauty, the form itself. Love, therefore, is both personal and philosophical. It motivates moral and intellectual growth, linking desire to the pursuit of truth. Politics, ethics, and love are inseparable in Plato's thought. The cultivation of virtue in the individual mirrors the cultivation of justice in the city. The soul's ascent mirrors the city's pursuit of harmony. Philosophers, understanding the forms, are uniquely positioned to lead because their moral insight allows them to balance competing interests, desire, and ambition with reason and justice. Knowledge is a moral responsibility. Those who understand must guide those who do not. Plato's dialogues are designed to enact this philosophy. Socrates questions interlocutors, revealing their assumptions and ignorance. The dialogues themselves are living exercises in reasoning, reflection, and moral development. Readers are not passive recipients. They are participants, challenged to examine their own beliefs and align their lives with the truths Plato seeks to reveal. In his later works, Plato expands this vision to the cosmos. In Timaeus, he presents the universe as the work of a divine craftsman, the demiurge, who orders matter according to eternal principles. Stars, planets, and living beings reflect proportion, harmony, and purpose. Chaos is not ultimate. The cosmos is intelligible, structured, and meaningful. Human beings, through study, contemplation, and virtue, can align themselves with this cosmic order. Knowledge of the universe becomes inseparable from knowledge of morality, justice, and the good. The influence of Plato's philosophy extends far beyond his lifetime. After his death around 347 BCE, his academy trained Aristotle, who would both inherit and critique his teacher's ideas. Platonic thought traveled into Hellenistic philosophy, Jewish theology through Philo of Alexandria, Christian thought through Augustine, and Islamic philosophy through thinkers like Al-Farabi and Avicenna. In each case, the principles of eternal forms, moral responsibility, and the ascent of the soul shaped metaphysics, ethics, and political thought. During the Renaissance, Plato experienced a revival. Scholars like Marsilio Ficino translated his dialogues, inspiring artists, scientists, and philosophers. His ideas on beauty influenced painting, sculpture, and architecture. His emphasis on rational order and harmony influenced scientific exploration. Humanist thinkers adopted his vision of the dignity of the individual and the cultivation of the mind, seeing in Plato a model for intellectual and moral development. In the modern era, Plato's legacy persists. Philosophers from Descartes to Kant wrestled with Platonic questions. The distinction between appearances and reality, the existence of eternal truths, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. Even critics like Nietzsche engaged with Plato, testing their own ideas against the challenge Plato posed: to confront illusion, pursue wisdom, and align life with truth. Contemporary debates in metaphysics, ethics, and political philosophy continue to reflect Platonic influence. Plato's philosophy is not merely a historical artifact. It is a living guide. He asks timeless questions. What is justice? What is the good life? What is truth? What is love? These questions demand reflection, courage, and moral engagement. They challenge individuals to cultivate wisdom, temper desire, and act justly. They challenge societies to pursue harmony, reason, and virtue. Plato's work reminds us that philosophy is not abstract contemplation. It is the practice of living wisely, ethically, and courageously. Imagine standing in the quiet grove where the academy once thrived. The city of Athens has changed beyond recognition. The voices of Plato's students have long faded, yet the questions remain. In asking them, we walk in Plato's footsteps, joining a tradition that began over 2 millennia ago. His vision of the soul, the city, and the cosmos challenges us to turn from shadows to light, from ignorance to understanding, from fleeting appearances to eternal truths. Plato does not offer simple answers. He offers the tools to seek, to question, and to ascend. Philosophy, he teaches, is the practice of living in accordance with eternal truths, cultivating the soul, guiding society, and understanding the cosmos. From the death of Socrates to the founding of the academy, from the allegory of the cave to the contemplation of the form of the good, Plato's vision endures, offering a guide for every human being seeking wisdom, justice, and the good life. Plato's influence did not end with his death. It radiated across centuries, shaping not only philosophy, but also politics, education, art, and religion. His academy continued to flourish, educating generations of thinkers who carried forward his vision. Among his students, Aristotle stands out. Though he would eventually diverge from Plato, Aristotle's work in logic, natural science, and ethics was built upon the foundation of Platonic inquiry. Aristotle transformed philosophy into a more empirical discipline, but he never abandoned the Platonic questions. What is truth? How should we live? How can human reason grasp the order of reality? In the Hellenistic period, Platonic thought spread further, influencing the development of Neoplatonism. Philosophers like Plotinus expanded on Plato's vision of the forms, emphasizing the ascent of the soul toward unity with the divine. For Neoplatonists, the material world was a reflection of higher realities, and the human soul's ultimate task was to return to its source. This spiritualized Platonic philosophy, linking ethics, cosmology, and mysticism, showing how deeply Plato's ideas could resonate beyond the practical concerns of politics and education. In the Roman world, Plato's philosophy mingled with Stoicism and other schools. Cicero, for example, drew on Platonic concepts of justice, virtue, and the good life, integrating them into Roman political thought. Plato's emphasis on the rational ordering of the soul and the moral responsibility of citizens resonated with those seeking guidance on governance, civic duty, and the pursuit of wisdom in a complex society. Christian thinkers, particularly Augustine, found in Plato a framework for understanding the soul, God, and morality. Augustine's conception of the city of God echoes Platonic distinctions between the eternal and the temporal, the soul and the body, the world of forms and the imperfect material world. For Augustine, Plato's metaphysics provided the language and structure to articulate Christian theology, bridging Greek philosophy and religious doctrine. In the Islamic Golden Age, philosophers such as Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes engaged deeply with Plato. They incorporated Platonic principles into their explorations of metaphysics, ethics, and governance, blending them with Islamic thought. Plato's insistence on reason as a guiding principle and his vision of education as the cultivation of virtue resonated across cultural and religious boundaries. His ideas became a bridge between civilizations, shaping intellectual history far beyond Greece. During the Renaissance, Plato experienced a revival that transformed art, science, and philosophy. Scholars like Marsilio Ficino translated and interpreted his works, inspiring humanists to explore the dignity of the individual and the potential for rational understanding. Artists such as Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Raphael drew on Platonic ideals of beauty, harmony, and proportion, translating abstract philosophical concepts into visual form. Science, too, was inspired by Platonic thought. The search for underlying order, patterns, and mathematical regularity in the cosmos echoed Plato's metaphysical vision. Plato's ideas influenced the Enlightenment, as philosophers like Leibniz, Descartes, and Kant wrestled with his questions of knowledge, reality, and morality. Descartes' dualism, the separation of mind and body, reflects a Platonic sensitivity to the distinction between the material and the ideal. Kant's moral philosophy, emphasizing duty, reason, and universal principles, echoes the Platonic search for eternal truths and the governance of the soul by reason. Even when philosophers disagreed with Plato, they engaged with his questions, showing the enduring power of his vision. Plato's relevance extends to modern times. In contemporary philosophy, debates about ethics, justice, and the nature of reality continue to reflect Platonic concerns. Political theory still grapples with the tension between democracy and wisdom, freedom and responsibility, a tension Plato first explored in the shadow of Socrates' death. Questions of education, moral development, and civic duty remain central to societies attempting to cultivate informed, virtuous citizens. Plato's insights into love, as articulated in the Symposium, remain influential in psychology, sociology, and ethics. Love is not simply emotion or attraction, but a force that motivates moral, intellectual, and spiritual growth. The ladder of love, from admiration of physical beauty to the contemplation of eternal. Beauty offers a framework for understanding human desire as a catalyst for virtue and wisdom. Even today, this framework can guide our understanding of relationships, community, and the pursuit of excellence. The academy itself became a model for institutions of learning across history. Its emphasis on dialogue, debate, inquiry, and holistic education influenced medieval universities, Renaissance academies, and modern liberal arts institutions. The idea that education should cultivate not only knowledge, but character, virtue, and critical thinking is deeply Platonic. His vision encourages generations of students to engage actively with ideas, question assumptions, and pursue wisdom as a lifelong endeavor. Plato's integration of ethics, politics, metaphysics, and cosmology presents a unified vision of human life. The soul, the city, and the cosmos are interconnected. Understanding one requires understanding the others. The pursuit of truth is inseparable from moral responsibility. Knowledge is inseparable from action. Reason is inseparable from virtue. Plato's philosophy does not compartmentalize human experience. It embraces its complexity and aspires to harmonize it. Returning to the allegory of the cave, we see that Plato's central message remains vivid. Most people live in shadows, mistaking appearances for reality. Philosophy is the process of turning toward the light, seeing things as they truly are, and guiding others toward understanding. The path is difficult, often resisted, and requires courage. Yet the rewards are profound: clarity, virtue, wisdom, and alignment with eternal truths. Plato challenges each of us to reflect. How do we live? How do we educate our minds and souls? How do we organize our societies? How do we understand and act upon what is true, just, and good? His questions demand participation, not passive observation. Philosophy is not an academic exercise. It is a call to action, a blueprint for the cultivation of self, society, and the world. The death of Socrates and the rise of Plato represent more than historical events. They symbolize a turning point in human thought. From the streets of Athens to the halls of the academy, from dialogue to systematic philosophy, a tradition of rigorous inquiry and moral responsibility was born. Plato extended Socratic questioning into a framework for understanding the cosmos, the city, and the soul. He built a vision of reality ordered by reason, a vision of education designed to cultivate virtue, and a vision of society guided by wisdom. Imagine walking through the ancient groves where Plato's students debated, where ideas about justice, beauty, truth, and love were not abstract theories, but living practices. The stones may have crumbled, the buildings may be gone, but the questions remain. They are the questions Plato poses to us today. How should we live? What is justice? What is truth? How do we ascend from shadow to light? Plato does not provide easy answers. Instead, he provides a method, a vision, and a way of life. Philosophy is not merely a profession. It is an ongoing commitment to examine oneself, understand reality, cultivate virtue, and contribute to the well-being of the city. His legacy is not only in what he wrote, but in how he taught, inspired, and modeled the pursuit of wisdom. Through Aristotle, the Neoplatonists, Renaissance humanists, and modern philosophers, Plato's influence endures. His questions remain urgent, his vision aspirational, and his method timeless. By studying Plato, we inherit a framework for exploring reality, ethics, politics, and love, a guide for living thoughtfully, courageously, and wisely. Imagine once more standing in a quiet grove, the academy's shade stretching across the earth. The city of Athens hangs around you, transformed across millennia, yet the essence of inquiry remains. By engaging with Plato's work, we participate in an unbroken chain of reflection, questioning, and striving toward wisdom. Philosophy is alive, and Plato's vision continues to challenge, inspire, and guide every human being willing to walk its path.